Admiral Daeho Kim stood on the bridge of Terra's Wrath and watched 200 ships come together in the dark space between Mars and Jupiter. 3 days ago, nobody on Earth knew that aliens existed, and now humanity was preparing to fight us. War among the stars. The massive viewscreen showed warships emerging from hidden asteroid bases and moon bunkers that had been built in secret for the past 15 years. Each ship carried weapons that could crack planets and crews trained to fight enemies they had never seen. Captain Eugene Park's voice crackled over the communication system from her transport ship. Admiral, the Marine divisions are ready for deployment. 15,000 soldiers equipped for zero-gravity combat and planetary assault. Her tone was calm, but Daeho could hear the excitement underneath. The Marines had trained for this moment since Earth first detected alien signals. 5 years ago, they had prepared for everything except the possibility that their first mission would be a rescue operation. Dr. Hyo-sung Lee worked frantically at her translation station, trying to decode more of the alien message. The original SOS had been clear enough, but now she was picking up fragments of other transmissions. Admiral, I'm getting more signals from the Veltar system. The situation is worse than we thought. They're not just under attack, they're being harvested. She looked up from her screens with worry in her eyes. The attacking ships are taking prisoners, but not for slavery. They're using the Veltar as components for some kind of biological computers. Boram Choi checked the engineering reports from across the fleet. Every ship had been modified with human technology that other species would find impossible to understand. The smallest destroyer carried enough nuclear weapons to sterilize a continent. The largest battleships had engines that could accelerate them to speeds that would kill most organic beings from the force alone. Human ships were built for crews that could survive acceleration forces that would crush weaker species. All ships report ready for jump, Admiral. The new faster-than-light drives are working perfectly. Taemin Song led the advanced reconnaissance squadron in ships designed for speed and stealth. His 12 fighters could reach the Veltar system hours before the main fleet and gather intelligence about the enemy. Each fighter was equipped with enough firepower to destroy a space station and shielding that could survive direct hits from weapons designed to stop much larger ships. Recon squadron ready for immediate departure, Admiral. We can reach the target system in 6 hours. The alien message had been simple enough once Dr. Lee translated it. A peaceful trading species called the Veltar had sent out a desperate call for help when machine ships appeared in their system and began destroying everything. The message had been meant for something called the Galactic Federation, but had somehow reached Earth instead. The Veltar had described their attackers as the Harvester Collective and begged for immediate military assistance. Mi Young-jung worked at the communications station, trying to establish contact protocols with alien technology. Admiral, I've managed to create a basic translation program based on the Veltar language patterns. We should be able to communicate with them once we arrive. She paused and looked at the data flowing across her screen. There's something else, sir. I'm detecting Federation ships in nearby systems, but none of them are moving toward the Veltar. It's like they're deliberately avoiding the area. Seong Ho Yoon trained the newest recruits in combat techniques that had been developed specifically for fighting in space and on alien worlds. The training was brutal by the standards of most species, but necessary for humans who would face unknown enemies with unknown weapons. The key to fighting machines is unpredictability. They calculate based on logical responses, so we respond illogically. If they expect you to take cover, you charge directly at them. If they think you'll retreat, you attack. His students nodded and practiced the techniques that would soon be used in real combat. The hidden fleet had been built using resources gathered from asteroid mining operations and advanced technology reverse-engineered from alien signals. Earth's governments had worked together in secret to create a space navy that could defend humanity if first contact went badly. The ships looked crude compared to the sleek alien vessels they had detected in distant systems, but human engineering focused on function over appearance. Every weapon system had backup systems, and every backup had its own backup. Human ships were designed to keep fighting even when most of their systems had been destroyed. Admiral Daeho studied the tactical displays showing enemy ship movements in the Veltar system. The Harvester Collective ships moved in perfect geometric patterns like pieces of a vast machine. They surrounded planets and space stations methodically and harvested everything useful before moving to the next target. They fight like a computer program, perfect efficiency but no creativity. That might be their weakness. Dr. Lee discovered more details about the Veltar from their transmissions. They were a species that had never developed weapons more advanced than basic defense systems. Their entire civilization was built around trade and peaceful cooperation with other species. They had never imagined that something might want to completely destroy them simply to harvest their biological material. Admiral, they're not soldiers. They're merchants and artists and scientists. They have no idea how to fight a war. The human fleet finished its preparations as more ships arrived from hidden bases throughout the solar system. Some were converted civilian vessels armed with military weapons. Others were experimental warships that had never been tested in combat. All of them carried crews that understood they were about to make humanity's first impression on the galaxy. The pressure was enormous, but every person in the fleet had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never return home. Captain Park reviewed the assault plans with her Marine commanders. We go in fast and hard. No warnings, no negotiations with the machines. Our job is to save as many Veltar as possible and eliminate any threat to civilian populations. The Marines had trained for this kind of operation, but never against enemies that used living beings as computer components. The thought of such treatment made even hardened soldiers angry. Taemin checked his fighters' weapon systems one final time. The reconnaissance mission would be dangerous, but vital for the success of the rescue operation. His ships would need to gather intelligence about enemy capabilities and identify priority targets for the main fleet. Squadron leaders report ready. We launch in 10 minutes. His pilots were the best humanity had to offer, but they were about to face technology that was completely unknown. The moment arrived and Admiral Deho gave the order that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. All ships prepare for faster-than-light jump. Target is the Veltar home system. Our mission is rescue and protection of civilian populations. Rules of engagement are simple. Anything that threatens civilians is a target. Anything that helps civilians is protected. The fleet acknowledged the order and began the jump sequence that would carry them to their first interstellar war. As the ships disappeared into the twisted space of faster-than-light travel, the people of Earth waited for news. Most of the planet still did not know that aliens existed or that humanity was about to reveal itself to a galaxy that had no idea what kind of species they were dealing with. The human fleet carried the hopes and fears of an entire world into the unknown darkness between stars. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Veltar system and immediately detected the signs of a massacre in progress. Captain Jiwon Han watched the tactical displays from her position on the diplomatic vessel. Soul's hope and felt her stomach turn at what the sensors were showing. Massive geometric ships surrounded the inner planets like metal spiders, consuming everything in their path. The Harvester Collective was systematically dismantling an entire civilization. Woojin Kang analyzed the enemy ship movements from his station aboard Terra's Wrath. The machines moved in perfect mathematical patterns with no wasted motion or energy. Admiral, they have 47 capital ships and over 300 smaller vessels. Their formation suggests they're designed for maximum efficiency and resource extraction rather than combat. He paused as more data came in. Sir, they're not just taking materials. The energy signatures suggest they're processing organic matter on an industrial scale. Taemin Song's reconnaissance fighters had arrived hours earlier and were already gathering detailed intelligence about the harvester operations. His reports painted a horrifying picture of mechanical precision applied to genocide. Command, this is Recon 1. The machines have orbital processing stations around each inhabited world. They're using some kind of energy beam to lift entire city sections into space for processing. His voice was tense with controlled anger. Estimated civilian casualties are in the hundreds of millions. Dr. Eunji Lim worked frantically in the medical bay to prepare for the survivors they hoped to rescue. The biological data from the Veltar transmissions showed they were similar enough to humans that basic medical treatment should work. All medical teams prepare for mass casualty treatment. We don't know what condition the survivors will be in, but based on the enemy's methods, it won't be good. Her staff worked with quiet efficiency. knowing they were about to see horrors beyond imagination. Captain Han opened a communication channel using the translation protocols Dr. Lee had developed. Harvester Collective Vessels, this is Captain Han of the Terran Fleet. You will cease all hostile operations against civilian populations immediately and withdraw from this system. The response came back in perfect mathematical language that the computers could barely translate. The machines acknowledged the communication but stated that resource harvesting would continue according to established parameters. Hyun-Woo Bae led the intelligence gathering team that was trying to understand how the harvester ships operated. The readings they were getting made no sense according to human understanding of technology. The enemy vessels appear to be controlled by a distributed artificial intelligence network. Each ship is both independent and part of a larger collective consciousness. He looked at the data with growing concern. Sir, I don't think they understand the concept of negotiation. To them, we're just another variable in their harvesting equation. So Young Nam monitored communications from the surviving Veltar populations on the planet's surfaces. The aliens were broadcasting desperate pleas for help in dozens of languages as the machine ships descended toward their cities. Captain, I'm picking up transmission from refugee groups hiding in the mountains and deep cave systems. They're reporting that the machines are taking prisoners alive for some kind of processing. Her hands shook as she translated the messages. They're keeping them conscious during the procedure. Admiral Daeho made the decision that would define humanity's first contact with galactic civilization. All ships' battle stations. Target priority is the orbital processing stations. We hit them first to stop the harvesting, then we deal with the fleet. He knew that attacking without formal warning violated every rule of civilized warfare, but human military doctrine was clear. Civilians came first and everything else was secondary. The human fleet moved with a speed and aggression that caught the Harvester Collective completely off guard. The machines had calculated for standard galactic combat protocols which involved formal challenges and structured battle formations. Instead, they faced 200 ships that opened fire immediately and aimed for maximum destruction rather than tactical advantage. Nuclear weapons designed for planetary bombardment slammed into processing stations before the machines could adapt their defensive patterns. Hyun-Woo led the first boarding party onto a damaged harvester ship using techniques that no galactic species had ever developed. Human soldiers wore powered armor that could survive in hard vacuum and carried weapons that fired depleted uranium rounds at hypersonic speeds. The machines inside the ship had never encountered enemies that could function in environments that would kill most organic life forms. Boarding successful, sir. These things weren't designed to fight infantry combat. The battle in space continued with a brutality that would have horrified any galactic observer. Human ships used ramming attacks and suicide runs to destroy enemy vessels that were larger and more advanced. Captain Park's Marines launched themselves from accelerating transports to board enemy ships while under fire. The harvesters began experiencing something their perfect algorithms had never accounted for: opponents who were willing to die to complete their missions. Wu Jin coordinated the tactical response as the enemy tried to adapt to human fighting methods. Sir, the machines are attempting to modify their combat programs, but they're having trouble processing our attack patterns. Every time they calculate a response, we do something that doesn't make logical sense. The human fleet was using tactics that ranged from brilliant strategic thinking to apparently suicidal charges that somehow worked. Captain Han established communication with Veltar survivors who had been rescued from a processing station. The aliens were traumatized beyond description, but grateful for rescue. Through Dr. Lee's translation program, they learned the horrible truth about harvester operations. The machines don't just kill us, they keep our brains alive and use them as biological computers. They process our neural tissue while we can still think and feel. The Veltar survivor speaking was one of only 12 rescued from a station that had processed over 10,000 beings. Dr. Lim worked desperately to treat the rescued Veltar and discovered the true horror of what the machines were doing. Admiral, these survivors show signs of neural interface surgery. The machines were literally using their brains as processing units while keeping them conscious. Her report sent waves of rage through every human ship in the fleet. The enemy had crossed a line that no civilized species should cross. The tide of battle turned as human reinforcements arrived from Earth. More ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and immediately joined the assault without waiting for orders or tactical briefings. The Harvester Collective found itself facing an enemy that seemed to multiply and become more aggressive with each passing hour. Their perfect efficiency was being overwhelmed by human unpredictability and apparent disregard for their own survival. Hyunwoo's boarding teams discovered the command centers of the Harvester ships and began systematically destroying them using explosives that were considered excessive by galactic standards. Sir, we're not just disabling these ships, we're making sure they can never be repaired or reactivated. Human demolition techniques are definitely more thorough than anything these machines have encountered. The battle reached its climax when Admiral Deho ordered the use of weapons that were banned by every galactic treaty. Planet-killer missiles designed to crack the crust of worlds were fired at the largest Harvester vessels. The machines had never imagined that any species would use such weapons in a system with inhabited planets. The explosions lit up space, like new stars, and sent shockwaves through both fleets. As the last Harvester ships were destroyed or driven from the system, the human fleet began rescue operations on a massive scale. Thousands of Veltar survivors were pulled from the wreckage of their civilization and brought aboard human medical ships. The aliens could barely comprehend that another species had traveled across the galaxy to save them from extinction. For humans, it was simply the right thing to do regardless of the cost. Colonel Sang-wook watched the burning cities of SciFiPrime through his helmet display as his transport ship descended toward the planet's surface. The orbital battle was won, but thousands of Harvester machines remained on the ground processing civilian populations in facilities that looked like mechanical slaughterhouses. His orders were simple and direct. Get down there and save everyone possible using whatever methods worked best. The Galactic Federation would have spent weeks planning a careful assault, but humans had learned that speed saved more lives than caution. Jinna Seo checked her engineering equipment as the transport touched down in what had once been the capital city's Central Park. The Harvesters had turned the elegant alien architecture into a nightmarish factory complex, connected by energy conduits and processing tubes. Colonel, the machines have integrated their technology directly into the city infrastructure. They're using the Veltar's own power grid to run their harvesting equipment. She studied the readings on her scanner and felt her anger rise. We can turn that against them if we're creative enough. The first rule of human ground combat was that everything could be a weapon if you used it correctly. Jinna had trained for years to see battlefield opportunities that other species would miss completely, while the Harvesters calculated optimal, defensive positions based on military threats. She was already identifying weak points in their industrial systems. Sir, if we overload the main power distribution center, we can cascade failures throughout their entire operation. Problem is, it means going through about 300 machines to reach the target. Donghyun Ryu set up his sniper position on top of a ruined apartment building that gave him clear sightlines across the processing facility. His rifle used ammunition that was illegal by galactic law because it could penetrate any known armor and continue through multiple targets. The Harvesters had defensive algorithms designed to counter energy weapons and explosive projectiles, but they had never encountered kinetic weapons that could punch holes through solid metal like paper. Targets acquired. I count 47 machines in the primary facility and approximately 200 Veltar prisoners being processed. The human assault began with a precision that would have impressed military observers from any species, but the methods used would have horrified them. Jinna's team moved through the city using sewers and utility tunnels to place improvised explosives made from common household chemicals. The Harvesters could detect military-grade weapons easily, but their sensors couldn't identify threats made from cleaning supplies and fertilizer. Charges placed, sir. When these go off, their whole processing network is going to experience some serious technical difficulties. Yejin Moon activated her psychological warfare equipment from a concealed position near the main facility. The machines operated using a collective consciousness that had never been exposed to the sounds of human warfare. She began broadcasting recordings of human battle cries and war songs through speakers that could shatter glass. Colonel, something interesting is happening. The machines are showing reaction patterns that suggest the audio is interfering with their network communications. Kitai Shin led his heavy weapons team in a direct assault on the facility's main entrance, using tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Instead of announcing their presence and demanding surrender, they simply blew holes in the walls and charged inside, firing weapons designed to destroy armored vehicles. The harvesters had programmed responses for siege warfare and formal assaults, but they had no algorithms for enemies who opened negotiations with high-explosive grenades. Colonel O coordinated the multi-pronged attack while staying in constant communication with his scattered teams. Human military doctrine emphasized flexibility and initiative at all levels rather than rigid command structures. Every soldier was trained to adapt their methods based on battlefield conditions and local opportunities. All teams report status. Remember, we're here to save civilians first and destroy machines second. If you have to choose between a clean tactical solution and rescuing one more prisoner, you rescue the prisoner. The explosions began exactly on schedule as Jinnah's charges detonated throughout the city's infrastructure. The harvesters had assumed their defensive positions were secure because they were integrated with essential systems that any rational enemy would want to preserve. They had never fought humans who would destroy an entire city to save its inhabitants. Power grids failed and processing equipment shut down as cascade failures spread through the machine network. Dong-hyun began systematically eliminating machine guards with precision shots that took advantage of their rigid behavioral patterns. Each harvester unit followed predictable movement algorithms that made them easy targets for a sniper who understood how their artificial intelligence worked. "Sir, I'm seeing something odd. When I destroy one machine, the others don't scatter for cover like organic troops would. They just recalculate their positions based on the new threat assessment, makes them sitting ducks for follow-up shots." The heavy weapons assault reached the main processing chamber, where hundreds of Veltar prisoners were connected to machines that were using their neural tissue as biological computers. Kite's team fought through corridors filled with defensive systems using weapons that turned solid walls into clouds of debris. "Processing chamber secure, sir, but we have a problem. These prisoners are connected to life support systems that are integrated with the machine network. If we just cut them loose, they'll die." Jinnah arrived at the processing chamber with her engineering team and immediately began analyzing the harvester biotechnology. The machines had created a system that was both elegantly designed and utterly horrifying in its efficiency. "Colonel, I think I can modify their own systems to safely disconnect the prisoners, but I need about 20 minutes of uninterrupted work time." She looked at the Veltar connected to the machines and felt sick at what had been done to them. "Sir, some of these people have been conscious and aware during their entire time as processing units." Yejin discovered that her psychological warfare broadcasts were having unexpected effects on the harvester collective consciousness. The machines were designed to process information with perfect logical efficiency, but human war music contained emotional content that their algorithms couldn't categorize. "Colonel, the audio is causing actual system errors in their network. They're trying to analyze the emotional content of the broadcasts, and it's creating infinite loops in their processing systems." The battle for the processing facility became a desperate holding action as more harvester reinforcements arrived to protect their valuable biological resources. Human soldiers used every trick they had learned in decades of training for alien warfare. They turned machine weapons against their former owners and used the facility's own defensive systems to create kill zones. "Sir, we're holding position, but barely. These machines adapt faster than anything I've ever seen." Colonel O made the decision that would save thousands of lives but violate every treaty on the treatment of prisoners and civilian infrastructure. "All teams prepare for facility demolition." "Jinnah, how much more time do you need?" The engineering officer looked up from her work with sweat running down her face despite the environmental controls in her armor. 5 more minutes, sir. I can get them disconnected, but we need to evacuate immediately afterward." The rescue operation succeeded through a combination of human ingenuity and complete disregard for the rules of civilized warfare. Jinnah managed to reverse engineer the harvester biotechnology and safely disconnect the Veltar prisoners, while Kaite's team held off waves of machine reinforcements. Dong-hyun provided covering fire as the survivors were evacuated to transport ships waiting outside the city. "All civilians secured, sir. Facility is clear for demolition." The final phase of the operation involved the complete destruction of the harvester processing facilities using methods that would have been considered war crimes if used against organic enemies. Human forces planted nuclear charges throughout the complex and withdrew to minimum safe distance. The explosions could be seen from orbit and guaranteed that the machines could never use the facility again. Mission accomplished, Colonel. Processing capability eliminated and all recoverable. Civilians evacuated. As the human forces regrouped and prepared for extraction, they received word that similar operations were being conducted across the planet. Everywhere human soldiers had encountered harvester facilities, the response had been the same. Maximum violence applied with surgical precision to save civilian lives. The machines had never faced enemies who would destroy valuable infrastructure to deny it to their opponents. The Veltar survivors who had been rescued from the processing facilities could barely comprehend what had happened. Their rescuers had used methods that seemed almost as destructive as the machines they were fighting, but every decision had been made to maximize civilian survival. Your people fight like demons, but angels guide their actions. The rescued Veltar leader spoke through translation equipment with tears running down his face. How do we thank someone who destroys cities to save strangers? Ambassador Subin stood in the great chamber of the Galactic Federation Council and faced the assembled representatives of 47 different species. Each alien delegate stared at her with expressions that ranged from horror to fascination as they processed reports of humanity's intervention in the Veltar system. The rescue operation had been a complete success by human standards, but according to galactic law, it had also been the most comprehensive violation of war crimes legislation in recorded history. The ethereal luminary delegate spoke first, using harmonic frequencies that the translation systems rendered as musical tones. Representative of the species calling itself human, we have received detailed reports of your military actions in the Veltar system. Your forces employed weapons of mass destruction in populated areas and deliberately targeted civilian infrastructure. These actions are forbidden under the Galactic Convention on Civilized Warfare. Subin listened to the accusations and realized that humanity's first impression on galactic civilization was going to be complicated. Admiral Junho Kim received urgent communications from Earth Command as 3 Federation battle fleets moved toward the Veltar system. The alien ships were massive and elegant with energy weapons that could sterilize planets from safe distances. However, their crews were trained for the ritualized combat that had been standard galactic practice for thousands of years. Admiral, the Federation fleets are equipped for fighting opponents who follow established rules of engagement. Their tactical doctrine assumes enemies will behave rationally and predictably. Min Seo Hong worked frantically to establish cultural context that might help the Federation representatives understand why humans had acted as they did. The concept of total war for humanitarian purposes was completely alien to species that conducted military operations like elaborate diplomatic ceremonies. Ambassador, the Federation species have never encountered enemies that required the kind of response we used against the Harvesters. Their wars are fought with formal challenges and scheduled battles. Taeho John analyzed the Federation fleet compositions and realized they represented a fundamental misunderstanding of what kind of species they were dealing with. The alien ships were designed to demonstrate power and technological superiority, rather than inflict maximum damage with minimum resources. Sir, their weapons are incredibly advanced, but they're designed for intimidation and precise strikes rather than the kind of overwhelming firepower doctrine we use. The Kelthera delegate clicked its mandibles in what the translators indicated was extreme agitation. The human forces used nuclear weapons inside an inhabited star system. They destroyed irreplaceable cultural artifacts and historical sites. They conducted military operations with no regard for collateral damage. Subin took a deep breath and prepared to explain human military philosophy to beings who had never faced an existential threat. Na Young Kwan coordinated the human response, as Admiral Daeho received orders to prepare for potential conflict with Federation forces. The irony was not lost on anyone that humanity might have to fight the Galactic Peacekeeping Force immediately after rescuing an entire species from extinction. Admiral, the Federation fleets are moving to contain us rather than investigate the Harvester threat. They seem more concerned with our violations of their laws than with stopping genocide. The Veltar representative stood to address the council chamber with words that would change the entire debate. "Honored delegates of the Federation, my people called for help, and you did not answer. The humans traveled across the galaxy to save strangers and fought with courage that preserved our entire species." The alien's translator conveyed emotional undertones that made several Federation delegates shift uncomfortably. "We formally request that the human forces be recognized as heroes rather than criminals." Subin seized the opportunity to explain humanity's perspective on warfare and civilian protection. "Honored delegates, my species developed our military doctrine on a world where extinction-level threats were common occurrences. We learned that sometimes you must destroy something completely to save what matters most." She gestured to the Veltar representative. "Every civilian we saved justified every rule we broke." The debate in the council chamber became heated as different species tried to understand how a civilization could develop such an aggressive approach to problem-solving. The Pacifica delegation argued that violence only created more violence, while the Centauri representatives pointed out that the harvester threat had been growing for decades without effective Federation response. "Perhaps we need to examine why our peaceful methods have been unsuccessful against certain types of enemies." Admiral Kim received tactical updates showing that the approaching Federation fleets were taking defensive positions rather than attack formations. The alien commanders are trained for conventional space warfare. Their ships rely on energy shields and long-range weapons that are designed for dueling rather than mass destruction. He studied the enemy formations and realized they were vulnerable to tactics that no civilized species would consider using. Tejo discovered critical intelligence about Federation military capabilities that explained why they had been unable to stop the harvester threat effectively. "Sir, their weapons are designed to disable rather than destroy. Their entire military philosophy is based on capturing enemies for rehabilitation rather than eliminating threats permanently." He looked at the data with growing understanding. They've never fought an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with or reformed. The crisis deepened when more reports arrived about harvester activities in other systems. The machines had been expanding their operations throughout Federation space for years, but the response had been limited to evacuation efforts and diplomatic protests. 17 different species have requested emergency assistance against harvester operations. The Federation response has been to relocate survivors and file formal complaints with the Machine Collective. Mincio presented cultural analysis that helped explain the fundamental differences between human and Federation approaches to conflict resolution. Ambassador, their species evolved on worlds where cooperation and peaceful negotiation were always possible. They literally cannot understand enemies that exist only to destroy and consume. She paused to review her data. To them, our methods seem unnecessarily violent because they've never faced threats that required maximum violence to stop. The turning point came when the Federation Council received real-time reports of a new harvester attack on the Alteran system. The machines had learned from their defeat in Veltar space and were using more aggressive tactics against civilian populations. The harvesters are accelerating their harvesting procedures. They're processing entire populations in hours rather than days. The council chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. Admiral Kim made the decision that would define humanity's relationship with galactic civilization. All ships prepare for combat operations. If the Federation wants to stop us from helping civilians, they'll have to fight us first. The human fleet moved to intercept the Federation forces while maintaining rescue operations for harvester victims. Navigation plot courses for maximum tactical advantage. Weapon systems. Prepare for engagement with multiple targets. Subin delivered humanity's ultimatum to the Federation Council with words that would be remembered for generations. We did not ask permission to save the Veltar because permission was not required. We will not ask permission to save the Alterans or any other species that faces extinction. She looked directly at each delegation. You can choose to help us or try to stop us, but you cannot ignore the problem and expect it to solve itself. The Federation fleets arrived at Veltar space to find human ships conducting rescue operations, while simultaneously preparing for battle against anyone who tried to interfere. The standoff that followed would force the galaxy to confront fundamental questions about the nature of civilization and the price of peace. Admiral Kim opened a communication channel to the Federation fleet commanders. This is Admiral Kim of the Terran Fleet. We are conducting humanitarian operations in accordance with human military doctrine. Any attempt to interfere with civilian rescue efforts will be considered an act of aggression. The response from the Federation Fleet Commander revealed the depth of the cultural divide between human and galactic approaches to problem solving. Admiral Kim, you are in violation of 47 separate articles of galactic law. Surrender your vessels immediately for processing and judicial review. The human admiral's response was brief and definitive. Negative. We have work to finish. President He Jinyang arrived at the edge of Veltar space aboard the diplomatic vessel, Soul's Hope, just as sensors detected a massive harvester reinforcement fleet approaching from deep space. The timing could not have been more perfect for demonstrating exactly what kind of species the galaxy was dealing with. 3 Federation fleets had positioned themselves to contain the human forces, while ignoring the approaching machine army that threatened to complete the genocide they had interrupted. Admiral Kim, you have permission to demonstrate human military capabilities to our new galactic neighbors. Fleet Admiral Changmin Park coordinated the response from his flagship as the human fleet prepared to engage both the arriving harvesters and any Federation forces that tried to interfere with the operation. The situation was unprecedented in galactic history. A newly discovered species was about to fight a 3-way battle to protect civilians while conducting diplomacy with the very people trying to arrest them. All ships, battle stations. Priority. Targets are harvester vessels, but Federation ships that interfere with rescue operations are authorized targets. Yuri Cho prepared for the most important diplomatic negotiation in human history, while weapons charged and targeting systems locked onto multiple fleets. Her job was to explain why humanity would rather fight the entire galaxy than allow genocide to continue unchallenged. President Yang, the Federation representatives are demanding we surrender immediately for war crimes proceedings. They seem unable to understand that we consider civilian lives more important than their legal procedures. The demonstration began when the Harvester Reinforcement Fleet entered weapons range and immediately targeted the Federation vessels, as well as the human ships. The machines made no distinction between different organic species when calculating optimal harvesting strategies. Seung-Jun Go watched the tactical displays as Federation crews experienced their first contact with an enemy that followed no rules and accepted no surrender. Sir, the Federation ships are taking massive casualties. Their defensive doctrine is completely inadequate against enemies that target life support systems directly. The human fleet moved with the practiced efficiency of a military force that had trained for total war against extinction-level threats, while Federation ships attempted to maintain formation and follow established battle protocols. Human vessels used ramming attacks and nuclear weapons to break through enemy lines and reach trapped civilian populations. The contrast in fighting styles was so dramatic that it looked like 2 different species engaging the same enemy. Ari Kim worked with rescued Veltar survivors to establish communication protocols with other threatened species throughout the galaxy. The reports coming in painted a horrifying picture of systematic genocide that had been building for decades, while the Federation debated appropriate responses. President Yang, we're receiving distress calls from 17 different systems. The Harvester Collective has been expanding operations, while the Federation filed diplomatic protests. President Yang opened a direct communication channel to the Federation fleet commanders, while human ships engaged superior numbers of enemy vessels around them. This is President Yang of Earth. You are witnessing what happens when a death world species encounters threats to civilian populations. We did not seek this fight, but we will finish it. The images being transmitted showed human crews fighting with an intensity that horrified and amazed galactic observers. The battle reached its climax when Admiral Park ordered the use of weapons that the Federation had assumed were theoretical, rather than practical. Planet-killing missiles designed to crack the crust of worlds were fired at the largest harvester vessels, while civilian evacuation continued around the explosions. All Federation vessels, this is your final warning. Withdraw to minimum safe distance or be considered hostile. The alien commanders had never imagined that any species would use such weapons in an inhabited system. Yuri delivered humanity's formal position to the Federation Council through communication systems, that transmitted her words across the galaxy, in real time. We are not asking for membership in your federation or recognition of our methods. We are informing you that human space is now open to any species facing extinction-level threats. She paused as explosions lit up the space behind her. We will operate under human rules of engagement, which prioritize civilian survival above all other considerations. The turning point came when Federation crews began requesting permission to cooperate with human rescue efforts, rather than trying to contain them. Admiral Chang Min received communication from the Altarian fleet commander, asking for tactical coordination against harvester targets. Admiral Park, our sensors show your weapons are far more effective against the machine collective than ours. Request permission to support your operations. The human response was immediate. Permission granted. Target anything that threatens civilians. Seung Jun coordinated the expanded fleet operations as more Federation ships joined the battle against the harvesters rather than trying to enforce galactic law against their rescuers. The combined firepower was overwhelming even for the machine collective, but the real victory was the precedent being established. Sir, we're receiving cooperation requests from Federation forces in 7 different systems. They want human tactical support against harvester operations. The final phase of the battle demonstrated why humanity's approach to warfare was so effective against threats like the Harvester Collective. While Federation forces tried to disable and capture enemy vessels for study, human ships focused on complete destruction that guaranteed the machines could never repair or rebuild their forces. All Harvester vessels in this system have been eliminated, sir. Processing facilities destroyed, and surviving civilian populations secured for evacuation. ARI worked with representatives from dozens of species to establish the framework that would become known as the Terran Accords. The agreement was simple and direct in typical human fashion. Any species facing extinction-level threats could request human intervention, regardless of Federation approval. The Accords recognize that different types of enemies require different responses. Diplomatic solutions work for rational opponents, but some threats can only be stopped through overwhelming force. President Yang addressed the Galaxy Council with words that would reshape interstellar politics for generations to come. We did not ask to become the galaxy's solution to problems that diplomacy cannot solve, but we accept that responsibility. She gestured to the rescued survivors from multiple species who stood behind her. Every being saved justifies every rule we broke. The establishment of early warning networks coordinated by ARI and Veltar survivor Catharis created the first effective response system to harvester activities. Instead of waiting for attacks to succeed before mounting rescue efforts, the new protocols enabled rapid deployment of human forces to threatened systems. Ambassador, we now have monitoring stations in 43 systems providing real-time intelligence about machine collective movements. Admiral Chang Min received his first official request for Deathworlder intervention from the Crystalline Assembly, whose silicon-based life forms were being processed for use in harvester computational matrices. Admiral, the Assembly is offering to provide base facilities and logistics support in exchange for military protection against the machine collective. They've studied our methods and concluded that our approach is the only effective response. The Mayimbe aftermath of the Veltar intervention established humanity's unique role in galactic civilization. They were not members of the Federation and operated under their own rules, but they had become the solution that peaceful species turned to when diplomacy failed. Yuri summarized the situation in her final report to Earth Command. We are now receiving an average of 3 requests per day for intervention against various extinction-level threats. The galaxy had learned that there were beings who would cross interstellar space to save strangers and fight wars that others considered too violent to contemplate. The human fleet continued its patrols of threatened systems while Federation forces provided support and logistics for operations they could not have imagined conducting themselves. Sir, we have reports of harvester activity in the Proxima sectors. Estimated civilian population at risk is 400 million. Orders are to deploy immediately with maximum force authorization. President Yang concluded humanity's first formal address to galactic civilization with words that captured the essence of Deathworld philosophy. We fight so that others may live in peace. We destroy so that others may build. We are willing to be monsters so that innocence can remain innocent. The rescued populations throughout the galaxy understood exactly what she meant and why they would always be grateful to the species that answered distress calls meant for someone else.